Hello to you, my friend, and welcome to part 5 of the Songs of Faith and Devotion album review as part of my ongoing Depeche Mode album review series. I must apologize for the length of time it's taken to bring out this episode, but you'll be pleased to know we're back on track. So this album is now over 30 years old, can you believe it? I'm sure if you're a fan, you probably feel just as old as I do. But Condemnation is one of the tracks on this album which I found myself skipping the most. In fact, I think this song and Get Right With Me were the songs I would tend to skip the most. However, as I've gotten older and especially analysing the song, I've got a sort of like a deeper understanding of the song now. I think when it first came out, to me it was a bit too bluesy and almost a bit jazzy in a way. Well, it's not jazzy, but to me at the time in my ignorance, I just thought it was too bluesy and jazzy kind of thing. Of course, the style of the song, the execution, it's very bluesy and very gospel, more gospel really, and of course, hence, songs of faith and devotion. Now that I'm older and wiser, I have a real sort of appreciation for the song. Also, this song will be cited as, according to Dave Gahan, is the most outstanding vocal he's ever done. And I think in all fairness, listening to it again for this review, listening to it, knowing what I know now, I was very impressed with Dave's vocal. I don't think when I was younger, it was just, I was listening more to the tune when it came out all those years ago, but listening to it now and, looking back at knowing what I know now about, Dave and what he'd been through and everything, and it was an incredible vocal, and I really feel that it's probably, as he's concerned, the best vocal he's ever done, and I think, he'd be chasing that forever, because it's an outstanding vocal. It certainly is. So in the back end of this video, we're going to dive deep as we always do. I'm going to analyze this song, break it down chord by chord on the piano, and we're going to also listen to some of the live sounds which they used during the devotional tour. But before that, I want to just talk a little bit about the interview I did not too long ago with Steve Lyon. The full interview is available on my streaming-only site, which is watchvg.com. I will release fragments of that here on YouTube, of course. And in that interview, we went into a lot of detail, as we always do. And Steve goes on to say, as it is well known and documented, that this particular song, Condemnation, would typically be a Martin Gore song. Now, this is an interesting question with a lot of the records, with all Depeche Mode records really. There's usually a Martin song, sometimes there's two, and sometimes the questions have been asked to the band, how do you know who's going to sing what song? And I think some of the interviews I've heard, and the answer usually is they don't usually have to think very hard about it, because I think when Martin presents the demos and they listen to the songs, I think just upon first listen, they probably have a very strong feeling as to, who's going to sing the song. I think in this case, Condemnation, which usually would be a Martin Gore song, it was Dave, however, that felt really strongly about it and wanted to sing this. And the rest is history. He gave us one of his most outstanding vocal performances ever. And in this video clip, I'm going to show you now, Steve Lyon talks a little bit about the recording of this track. Dave spoke about Condemnation being the best vocal he's ever done. And that was, you would have been involved in the recording of that? It was in the, I think they set it up in the bathroom.
No, we're downstairs. Yeah, fantastic vocal performance, firstly.
Yeah.
Incredible. I remember doing it. But downstairs of this villa was this kind of underground car park. And we'd kind of stored the flight cases and, the wooden crates that we later crushed and jumped on to make the rhythm sound of the track. And I can't remember how it came about, with if it was Flood's idea, it was Dave's idea, I don't know, but anyway, he decided he wanted to be downstairs and record the vocal, and it had this really long reverb. And I do remember, Flood was like, is this going to be all right? I said, yeah, it'd be great. It's going to sound different because it's in this massive room. Dave felt comfortable, which is the most important thing. you know, with the candles out, and the atmosphere, the vibe was good, and he absolutely killed it. Because correct me if I'm wrong, others may know better than I, but initially that song was a Martin song, so that was going to be a his vocal. But Dave felt really passionately that he could nail it, and he did, certainly, yeah.
Mm-hmm. No, that's interesting. And just so obviously recording something like that, you obviously got a lot of the sound of the room, obviously.
Yeah, totally, yeah.
So he'd have the headphones in, and the track was fed to him. And
yeah, well, I because again, going back to the conversation with the facts and working out with the rooms and stuff, I'd actually asked if we could have a multicore that go downstairs, because I was using it as a reverb room. So instead of using a reverb box, I put up a couple of microphones downstairs, and there was a speaker, and I was old school using it as a reverb room, and we used it on various things. The original version of Judas, for example, I remember doing stuff. I did all kinds of bits and pieces, put some guitars down there and stuff, but that was my intention. And again, I can't remember how exactly it came about, but we did the vocal down there, and it fantastic vocal performance. The sound of it, obviously, is quite particular. But that's the fun of working in a different space, in a different environment. The performance, again, it's amazing.
Very interesting recollections there from engineer and producer Steve Lyon. It was interesting how he said that although we know in history how hard that record was, Flood really suffered and the band really suffered, Steve goes on to say that I think he was oblivious to all the drama. He was just doing his job there. So yeah, that interview is worth watching. There's lots of info on there which has never been disclosed before. Right, now I want you to join me to come over to my piano and keyboards as we break down and analyze this song in detail. So the basis of this song is very sort of bluesy, very gospel kind of feel. And had they chosen to go down a more sort of classical kind of feel, it probably would have felt very, very different. But what I think is important in this, in utilizing the gospel feel, is really gives this song a really sort of rebellious kind of feel. Remember that blues is really like the basis for rock and roll and all these kinds of things. It is very important that you loosen up. And what I mean by that is, if you listen to this, just the beginning of Condemnation, that's kind of like having a margarita in a sunset. It's lazy, it's easy, it's easy. And that is what the foundation of the song is, just very sort of easy. I've often talked about blues as, sometimes I use the analogy, drunk man crossing the road. It's just easy, and it's always at that fine line between, it sounds like it's a mistake, or I guess what I'm trying to say is the approach they took for the song was brilliant. And although I was never a huge fan of the song, the more I learned, I realized that Martin is just a genius, and these ideas were beyond his years. He wrote these songs when he was young, and there's a lot of positive things I can say about Martin's songwriting, as I do. But now I'm going to demonstrate this in block chord form. I'm going to do it very, very simply, and then I'm going to move on to the samples, and I'm going to demonstrate some of the original samples that they used when they performed it live during the devotional tour. I have Fletcher's keyboard bank over here. So just starting off, just for context, and I'm just going to sing this in a very light voice. I'm not going to belt it and perform it, because if I have to, it's going to be a very hard video to watch. But we're just going to sing this lightly and for demonstrational purposes. So it starts here on the B, just sketching it out. Condemnation. And then it moves to the D sharp here. Tried. And then to the E. Here on the stand with the book in my hand. And then we get to the G diminished. Truth on my side. Back to the B. Accusations. And then D sharp, lies, and then to E. Hand me my sentence, I'll show no repentance, I'll suffer with pride, onto the D diminished. We then get to the bridge, or which is, there's no chorus in this, I guess you can call it a bridge or a variation, and this starts, if for honesty you want apologies, I don't sympathize, and this starts on the E, if for honesty, and we come up here to the G sharp minor, you want apologies, and we end here on the G augmented, I don't sympathize. If for kindness you substitute blindness, please open your eyes, and then we end on an E6. And then it starts again, it comes around, that's the exact structure the second time around. There's just a slight variation as it starts, which is as follows. Before the second verse comes in, it goes. It comes out to the F sharp major. And then he comes in with the second verse. Condemnation. And then to the D sharp. Why? And then to the E. Because my duty was always to beauty. And then to the G diminished. That was my crime. And then back to the B again. Feel elation. And then D sharp again. High. And then E. To know I can trust this speaks of injustice, to the G diminished. Time after time. And then we get the bridge again. If you see purity and immaturity, well, it's no surprise. Once again. If for kindness you substitute blindness, please open your eyes. And once again, that's that bridge part. It's the E, G sharp minor, to G augmented. If for kindness you substitute blindness, please open your eyes. And that's an E6 chord at the end there. Okay, so I've just done sort of like layman's block chords there. I want to sort of demonstrate how Alan would do it on the record by throwing in a few of the nuances and flares. He typically started off like this. He'd like roll this note here. And of course it would be different slightly every night when he played it live, because obviously, although it was played to a click track, if you watch the devotional live, it would be like the boom, chuck, boom, chuck. You know, he would play it slightly. But I'm just going to sort of highlight some of the sort of fundamental parts which typically he did live and also which appear on the record. Okay, then condemnation. Then there's this little, what I call walk it up. Condemnation. Da da da. And then you come here to the D sharp. To the D sharp. Try. And then here's a D sharp 7. So tried. There. Then to the E. Now notice what I did on the E there. That is what we call, we keyboardists and pianists, we call that a crush note. If you're not a musician, what is a crush note? A crush note is when you move from very quick succession, from a black to a white note. You kind of slide it. And the reason we keyboardists and pianists do that is because a piano and a keyboard, it is a percussion instrument, and we do that to give the illusion or to emulate the sound of a bend. Remember, when you're a guitarist, you can bend your strings. We keyboardists, pianists, we cannot bend the keys, obviously. So by using a crush note, we give the illusion of a bend. So Alan uses that on this E here. He gives that really cool bend. I'll just start from the beginning just to give it context. And then he walks it up. The 7th there, and here's the E with a bend, and then straight to the G diminished, and then this, and then again, look it up. E with the crush notes, and then okay, and then we get to the if for honesty you want apologies. Once again, that's just an E to a G sharp minor, and then this time it's a G augmented. I don't sympathize if for kindness you substitute blindness. Please open your eyes. And it ends on the E6. What I want to also point out now is when they performed it live, it was slightly different. It was performed in a different register. Basically, they transposed it. So the record was Condemnation up there on the B. What they would do is for the live performances during devotional, they would transpose it a semitone lower. So instead of being Condemnation, it would be Condemnation. Now, why do we transpose songs as singers and musicians? If you're a musician, you'll understand. We do that because obviously if we sing a song in a lower key, it's easier to sing, it's less taxing on the voice. So once again, the record, Condemnation. And when they did it live in devotional, it was Condemnation. It's worth mentioning that these days when Depeche Mode perform it, it's now played, I believe, in the G. Condemnation. Dave sings it a lot lower now because obviously his voice has changed a lot. So what I want to point out now is what would be happening during the live performance during the devotional tour. Now remember, during this song, Alan moved away from his keyboards and he went down to the piano in the front of the stage. You had the two backing singers at the top. Martin moved away. I think he stood by a microphone and he did this the high-pitched Martin scream, and then it was just Fletch on the keyboards. So there'd be a backing track playing, boom, cha, boom, cha, and it's all, and then Alan would come in. Okay, and then it was just Fletch on the keyboards. Now, remember, the song was not played in this key when they did it live. They played it a semitone lower. So what I've got here is, on this keyboard at the top here, I have the original keyboard banks from the devotional tour. Now, obviously, the only person playing keyboards on that particular song was Fletch, so naturally I have Fletch's keyboard banks here. And what you'll find is very interesting on this is we have home. Now, that's straight from the record. Now, that sounds to me like Martin's voice, obviously. Now, the way this would have been done live is now, I'm going to have to demonstrate this with, obviously only got two hands. I want to show you how Fletch would trigger his parts. So, the drum starts, boom, cha, boom, and then Alan goes. And then, as Alan's doing that, Fletch would hold this key down. Dave goes on to do Condemnation while he holds that. That's really all the parts Fletch has. He has this. Now, the only other part that Fletch would play is the second note here, and that is when we get to the bridge, and he'd hold it down as follows. And to give you context, that's if for honesty you want apologies, I don't sympathize. Trigger again. If for kindness you substitute blindness, please open your eyes. And then the last note. There. Open your eyes. So you get what I'm saying. Alan would play the piano, Martin's standing there going, So over here on the Fletch sound bank, when it gets to the part where Martin goes, like belts it, Fletch would trigger this. Now that's interesting. So Martin's actually going, and of course the backing singers are doing this as well. But we also have Martin's voice on this keyboard here. which Fletch will trigger at the right time. Why do we do that? Well, obviously, you must remember that when we record in a studio, Martin would probably multi-track that several times. But of course, when he's live, he only has his one voice. So some people might say, oh, that's cheating. It's not. It's just, instead of having his voice on a backing track, it'll be triggered by Fletch in this case. But Martin will be going with that at the top of his voice, and it's like a form of doubling up or having another backing singer. And when it gets to the end of the song, which is ends that way, Fletch would just hold down this key. I think this might be Alan's voice in here as well, doing the harmony. That's Martin going and Alan going Listen. It certainly sounds like Alan's tonality. So I'm just going to sort of like free flow it now. I just want you to listen to how strong and how stern and how powerful these chords are. Without the singing and everything. And as I've said before, this was interestingly one of the songs I skipped the most. But the more I've analysed it over the years, I suppose as I've gotten older and wiser, I think it's a very, very good song, actually. Walk it up. 7th, E, crash note, and then diminished. Walk it up. 7th, E, crash note, and then G, diminished. So I think if you're a beginning keyboardist or pianist, the chords aren't difficult. I think the challenging part of the song are all the little flares and nuances. The rolling, and then the walking it up, and it has this kind of unruliness to it. I don't want to say a sloppiness, but it has this. It's not. It's like it's not played flawlessly. It's just. I can't find the words. It's not lazy, but it just has this. I guess like a rough feel to it, like an unruliness. I do love it, and there is something in the song which reminds me of this, and forgive me for segueing, but I'm sure you'll appreciate this. When you're here before, I couldn't look you in the eye. You're just like an angel. Your skin makes me cry. A little bit like Creep from Radiohead. There's something there.